everyone. Welcome to another episode in the Leading Safely podcast. Sunday, the 28th of April, was World Safety Day. So off the back of that, I had the privilege to chat with and record a representative for one of the most well-known regulating authorities in the world, OSHA. The special guest is actually Jim Frederick, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Labour for OSHA. For those of you who don't know what OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in America. With the American Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, Congress created OSHA to ensure the safe and healthful working conditions for workers by setting and enforcing standards and providing training, outreach, and assistance. The OSH Act covers most private sector employers and their workers, in addition to some public sector employers and workers in the 50 states and certain territories and jurisdictions under federal authority. Those jurisdictions include the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Wake Island, Johnston Island, and the Outer Continental Shelf Lands as defined in the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act. OSHA actually has approximately 2,400 inspectors, covering more than 8 million workplaces, where 130 million workers are actually employed. To say this is an agency with their work cut out for them is an understatement. Jim himself was sworn in on January 20, 2021, and started work with OSHA on the same day. Although it was his first day working with the government, it wasn't his first experience with OSHA. Before joining the Department of Labour, Jim devoted 30 years of his career to worker safety and health, primarily as a union safety and health representative, including 25 years with the United Steelworkers Union. He also actively engaged with OSHA and many of OSHA's stakeholders throughout his career. His work at OSHA focuses on real and meaningful worker involvement without fear of retaliation so that employers and safety and health professionals can better control hazards and lower the risk of workers experiencing acute traumatic injuries and chronic occupational illnesses. On any given day at OSHA, Jim can be found working on the agency's regulatory priorities, engaging with workers, employers, advocates, and others in the occupational health and safety community, recruiting and retaining staff, developing strategies to ensure that whistleblower protections are focused on the outcome for workers who have been victims of retaliation, and refining OSHA's cooperative programs to ensure that workers are a vital part of the good work that is being done. Jim believes that open and clear communication is key to ensuring that workers understand their rights and that employers know their responsibilities. He works to make sure the agency is keeping up with technologies, tools, and resources to increase OSHA's reach to the agency stakeholders. One example of this is adding the agency's first national family liaison to support families who lost a loved one in a workplace incident. Jim often notes that the work at OSHA since January 2021 has been an incredibly rewarding experience. He considers his opportunity to serve the agency, department, administration, and America's workers a privilege second to none. Jim is an incredibly smart and down-to-earth man, and I know you will enjoy my chat with him. So here it is. Thanks for joining me on the Leading Safely podcast, Jim. It's nice of you to share your time and your insights with me.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Georgina. Appreciate it.
No worries. I'm going to go into the health and safety questions that I ask all of my special guests, with that first one being, what do you think makes an effective leader when it comes to health and safety?
Well, sure. And I've thought through this a little bit, and I think that there are a number of things that I would highlight. And the first one is specifically one that is not just for a health and safety leader, but for anyone doing workplace health and safety. And that is something I always try to remember, that our most important tool are our ears, that listening and being that certain that people are heard is vital to occupational safety and health, as well as to leadership of occupational safety and health professionals or others. And so that's always where I kind of start around that. Another would be caring compassion. That for me, what that really means is knowing and understanding what my why is. And I often, when talking to people, be they staff across the regulator here in the States, OSHA, or health and safety professionals or workers in a workplace, I always try to work that into what is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I have a number of whys, but the one that often comes to mind for me is to think about the number 15, because in the US, the number 15 is the number of, on average, the number of workers that are killed at work in an acute traumatic injury situation. Does not account for occupational illness and disease, but it's an important number for me because one, it's far too many. But
Yep.
secondly, and equally important for me, it's the real motivation of what drives me to get back up the next morning and come back and try to do everything that we're trying to accomplish the next day. I also, of course, am a big proponent of the model of learning and improving as we go, for a leader to really take that to heart and integrate that into their day-to-day work. And I also have always been very much engaged with the worker side of the worker health and safety continuum, and so real and meaningful worker involvement, to make certain that workers are engaged and involved in all aspects of decision making from beginning to end in health and safety is just vital and important. Because over my course of my career, I learned very early and very often that workers could tell me about both their successful work, their controls that they made certain were in place to address safety hazards, and importantly, why they use them. And so
Yep.
all of that was always so important for me to take, if I was looking at a specific issue or just generally speaking in a workplace. So all of that. And then communication skills are obviously a must, and something that sometimes in the health and safety profession, I feel like it's a little bit of a second or third billing. And so communication skills need to stay on top of that list. And one of the things, the last thing on this question, the one thing we're really trying to embrace at OSHA in the States is embracing safety as a core value in every organization. And what that means for me is a couple of things. One, it means that there's a mature safety and health management system, so that process is in place to
Mhm.
find and fix hazards and unsafe conditions, make sure we're following the appropriate control measures and putting those things in place. And secondly, that the decision making, like I talked about, engaging and involving workers, but that the decision making considers occupational safety and health issues from the boardroom to the break room and everywhere in
Yep.
between.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month or so ago, I put a little video up about, safety being a core value, on LinkedIn. And obviously you get, different feedback. And my experience has always been, every organization you'll see a billboard that might say, safety is our first priority, or safety is, it always refers to it as if it's a product or a thing. Whereas for me, it is very much what you said. It's like an intrinsic value that needs to be part of every role in every department, in every, organization, as opposed to this thing that, is a product of a particular team within an organization. And it's only that team that really looks at it when things go wrong or when there's something else. The other interesting thing I thought from what you were saying was, I know, OSHA itself and, doesn't prescribe to a certain theory, or methodology, so to speak, when it comes to safety. But certainly the things that you were saying there about, what you see as a leader may align with the more newer perspectives on safety. Is that safe to say from, what you've experienced in your career?
So yes, I think that's very safe to say. And I feel like uh, thinking in terms of the new view of safety has really was something it came quite naturally for me,
Yeah.
because I spent a considerable amount of time in my career in health and safety, dealing with the negative repercussions of the vast
Mhm.
array of my term, Jim Frederick's term, not any official U.S.
Yeah.
government term, but blame the worker programs and the negative impact that they had on workplaces, which essentially boiled down to they kept people from reporting hazards,
Yeah.
reporting unsafe
Yeah.
conditions, reporting near misses, and reporting injuries. And safety and health, the art and the science of performing the tasks day to
Mhm.
day health and safety professional or a supervisor or a maintenance person is hard. It's hard work to
Yeah.
do. It's hard when we know about the hazards, but when the things aren't reported, it's impossible because then you are really just working with a real deficiency in that knowledge and understanding what's going on in that workplace. So yeah, the new view of safety really was a way for me to turn a corner and recognize that a number of things that I'd been felt like I was doing all along of trying to learn and improve
Yeah.
and listening to the voice of workers and amplifying that voice where it was possible to do is so vital in human and organizational performance, new view of safety,
Yeah.
uh, fundamental pieces. So yeah, I have tried. We've tried to do. I look at the regulator in the U.S. that there are a number of things that fit very closely with that new view of safety. Not everything, for sure, not
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there are a number of things that do fit in quite well, and we just need to try to continue to amplify that, and also to make sure that people don't just see the Occupational Safety and Health Administration as the organization that sets rules and enforces them. There's a whole lot more to this agency and all the various tools that are in the toolbox at this agency to help workers and employers at any given work site, regardless of kind of where they are on their journey of maturity of their safety management system, to
Uh-huh.
continue to increase that maturity, make it better so that they're fixing those unsafe conditions and those hazards, reducing risk. And, at the end of the day, those robust controls are going to keep people from hitting the ground when they fall or the machine capturing them when something goes awry.
Yeah. No, definitely. And you kind of alluded to it there in regards to the second question. So you must have, no doubt, encountered those people that are really stuck in their ways or that are refusing to make change, or even those that just, their behaviors perhaps don't align with those positive safety outcomes for whatever reason, intentional or not. What kind of tactics or, words of wisdom, what have you used in the past to kind of help people understand, they need to change?
Well, and so I've always bought into this ideal that way overgeneralization, but that employers basically from kind of a U.S. North American, but I think it's fair to say a global perspective, fall into one of a few categories. And the three categories I would always talk about were those that are in a very mature health and safety systems approach. They are already engaging with workers, talking to them, understanding hazards, being very proactive in addressing them. To them, the regulator and the for those employers in the US, the regulator is kind of an afterthought. Yeah,
Mhm.
OSHA may show up, but we're already doing things above and
Yeah.
beyond minimum requirements. The other
Mhm.
end of that spectrum are the
Mhm.
employers that really haven't taken an approach. They don't understand the principles of a systems approach to health and safety. And workers in most of those places, workers are just part of the profit and loss model in
Yeah.
that it's just we're just the worker is just like any other raw material that goes into the product that they're producing, and is replaceable. And
Yeah.
so in those workplaces, I really feel that again, the regulator agency in the U.S. and around the world, the regulators play an important and vital role to at least make them perform up to a minimum set of requirements so that it somewhat levels the playing field with other employers. And again, that's just important because in that category, those that aren't doing quite as much around health and safety probably have other operational deficiencies that they're taking some shortcuts, cutting some costs, maybe not
Yeah.
turning out the best product, but they're doing it at a lower cost. And so it creates that minimum floor creates an important floor for those that are doing it right. But in the middle of those two is that middle category. And I think, at least in the US or North America, for sure, that's the biggest category of employers and workplaces. And those are the workplaces that get it. They understand what they're trying to do, that workplace and worker health and safety is important,
Mhm.
but they're struggling along maturity model a bit, and they're trying to improve. For them, again, from the last 3 years and a few months here at this job that I've had at OSHA, I see that OSHA is vitally important again in all of the aspects, from training and education to our compliance assistance programs, to our voluntary protection program that helps elevate and recognize those that are going above and beyond, and then of course enforcement too when it's needed and necessary. And so, all of those different pieces, and there's more than those few examples, but all of those pieces from the agency are important to that middle group, and hopefully helping them advance along that spectrum into the higher level maturity on their system. So yeah, that's one thing for sure. And I think that again, that holds true around the world, at least from my experience of being in workplaces in other parts of the world, and listening and hearing from wonderful people like yourself about what's going on in workplaces in other parts of the world.
No, that's great. And I was thinking, like the alignment, I guess, as a regulator to Australian, regulatory authorities as well. What's the model kind of look like with, OSHA in the States? Is it an education and enforcement model? Is it a coaching? Like what's on the advertisement? What would it say? And then, like, do you feel like as an organization, obviously, like it's doing what it needs to do, or do you need more people? Should I be sending Australians over there to help you,
No,
do what you need to do?
all great questions. So, this is the year 2024, and so in the States, OSHA is roughly 54 years in
Oh,
existence.
wow.
We've
Yep.
we've been around a while,
Yep.
but still also, in some regards, a relatively young agency, or a young entity of the federal government. So so
Yeah.
so I think it's something that is continuing to evolve. There is also, that evolution takes shape with whomever are in the
Yeah.
point of positions at the agency, and steer towards one goal or another. But
Mhm.
as we continue to evolve, I think it's a universal challenge, because if you walk up to a health and safety person around the US or probably around the world and ask them about US OSHA to describe it to you, you probably get the answer of, well, OSHA is the agency that sets rules and enforces them. And
Mhm.
that's just part of that explanation. All of these
Yeah.
other things that we've been talking about are also important and vital. We reach over 1 million people a year through the various prongs of health and safety education and training that are in place at OSHA, for example. And so, that's not nearly enough. We could certainly do more, but
Yeah.
we also, it's a very good starting point. As far as like the actual enforcement goes, we employ at federal OSHA of just under 900 compliance officers, the folks that are the
Okay.
folks coming out from an office to a workplace to do the compliance work.
Mhm.
And then in the states, this gets a little wonky, but the about half the states in the US run their own OSHA program. We help fund part of that, and the states fund part of that.
Okay.
And so when
Yep.
you add the compliance officers together from roughly half the state plan and the federal, you get it's just under 2,000 compliance officers
Oh,
across the footprint
wow.
of the US. But 2,000 compliance officers with a whole lot of workers and workplaces to
Yeah.
protect.
Not a
It's
lot.
a big task. Fortunately, we really are able to leverage our work by kind of the public acceptance and knowledge of when we find a hazards and do enforcement at one workplace. It's often well known across the industry through industry publications, or at least regionally through local media, about what goes on with the agency in a workplace, particularly after something bad has happened that leads OSHA to be there. And I think that has a much broader reach than just that one workplace. So it's not just a
Ah,
door-to-door fight for those
yeah.
2,000 compliance officers to try to change those workplaces that aren't in that higher level
Yeah.
category that we described earlier. But we get a little bit of advantage of the multiple effect of the farther reach of our work. And so, we sure see it. And it's one of the things we're really working on, is trying to make certain that one, we are here and available I keep saying every chance we get is we are here and available to talk to people if they have issues, they have concerns, they need more assistance from this agency. Take advantage of the time that myself and the others in our office are here because we want to work with them, and it's been very beneficial in doing that. Now, saying that on your podcast will probably make the phone ring a few more times than we have the to field right away.
Yeah.
But do our best to meet those needs and make sure we're talking with the folks that would like to talk about what's going on with their systems and their workplaces and where they wrestle with compliance with some of the requirements from the agency, or where they're well above and beyond and would like to see our rules improved to be there.
Yeah. No, that's it's an interesting take. And I think in Australia we certainly started off with more of that coaching and educational model. However, as times have progressed, and a little bit you alluded to it there with, like depending on who's in government, but then depending on who's also in charge of the regulatory organization, obviously, just like a new CEO does, they steer, what the, theories and models and the practices of that organization is going to be like. But I'm certain you possibly would not have heard of this case. So in the state where I live, a workplace health and safety manager was actually personally held liable after a worker, was injured at work, received an occupational illness, had an illness occur, and she failed to take action after being notified of the risk and was held personally liable. But how it happened was, once the risk was identified, she actually went to our regulator in our state and asked for assistance and went to a couple of conferences with the regulator and kind of, sought out that advice. The regulator took that information to the Office of Workplace Health and Safety Prosecutions, and that is what was used as evidence against her in court. So we started out on that road of, particularly in Queensland, of being, we're all here for you, we want to help you. But then when you hear of, and it is just one case, and it may be that unicorn in amongst everything, right? But still, it doesn't bode as a good example either. And the other side to that is when you do attend conferences with our regulator, a lot of their staff will turn up, and it's almost like they are proud of the fact that when they go to a site, they can issue, up to 70 fines at this amount of money, and we're going to hold workers responsible for not wearing PPE. And it's that kind of minuscule kind of detail, as opposed to there are hundreds of companies that currently blatantly breach legislation and don't abide by, simple things like, someone could fall off a roof and there's no protection. But when you see these officers attend events, they're like genuinely proud, and their focus is so narrow and so, like low level on how many fines I can issue. A lot of us in the industry feel they're missing the boat when it comes to really hitting the mark with health and safety.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that it is important to find the right combination and use that tool out of the toolbox, or those tools out of the toolbox that do involve with some criminal activity, criminal action of prosecution of the really blatant employers that are the bad actors. In the States, it's not fair to say there's one size fits all to this, but in the States, it's typically when they're a repeat offender and they have time and time again just had disregard about the lives of people that are working for them. And there's no time that's acceptable. Workers have certainly paid the price for eons since the first person ever went to work of bad
Right.
health and safety at that workplace. And
Yeah.
and still today, again, back to that number 15 in the US of the acute traumatic
Yeah.
fatalities from an injury. So we've got
Yeah.
we've got lots of work to do to continue this
Yeah.
process, to turn those numbers, to make those numbers lower of the ultimate fatalities, and try to get more and more employers to recognize and understand that by doing good health and safety, they're probably also going to become much better at their operations of what they produce, sell, or provide as a service.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I guess in amongst all that information, there lies the next question, you work for such a large agency where you have the power to, potentially create something if you wanted to. But my question is around if you had all the money and all of the resources, and you personally, Jim, got to create something that you could solve a workplace health and safety issue with, what would you invent and why would you invent it?
It's a great question, and one, just in the construct of the United States government, OSHA is actually a very small agency in the course of the government, and we as an agency, as I talked to a number of our compliance officers, our total staff is under 2,000, and
Yeah.
when we look at our the amount of money that we receive to do the work we do, and think about the population that we have in front of us to do that work. It's actually a relatively small quantity per
Yeah.
workforce or per worker, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge to stretch
Mhm.
our resources, to make our resources find those dollars, finding the right things to do to have the biggest impact we can on worker and workplace health and safety. But if I did have all of the money to make some change. The one thing I think I would focus on is to reduce the barriers to workers participating in their health and safety systems at their workplace. And for me, it comes down to all different kinds of examples. But one of the things that I had never had very much or any firsthand experience prior to being in this job, is human trafficking that continues to go on this today in 2024 in the US and around the world. It's just very challenging that these kind of activities are still taking place, and that in some cases, employers knowingly or unknowingly are taking advantage of people at this that are being trafficked, is one example of people who have huge barriers to their
Yeah.
participation in
Wow.
health and safety. They're afraid to say anything about any part of their job, let alone raise a concern about an unguarded piece of equipment or fall protection. um,
Yeah.
I would make sure that we could take resources to break down these barriers so that workers are able to participate, so they can talk about those hazards that they know about from their experience at work and they face every time they do their normal tasks, or just once in a while when they're doing a unique task and run into some unexpected
Yeah.
condition or hazard that should be addressed. We've talked about this already today, but workers just are the ones that know the best about the hazards at work, and if they feel confident about being part of the conversation, if they're heard when they speak, then safety systems really mature much more, and safety and health improves at that workplace for everyone involved.
Yeah, that would actually be really great. I mean, it speaks to psychological safety. It speaks to, like risk management. It speaks to a whole heap of things, doesn't it? If you could remove those barriers and just allow them to, really champion it, and I guess provide management with the understanding in a nice enough way without having to issue a gazillion fines and without having to
Totally.
put people in jail. Oh, what a lovely world that would be, Jim.
For
That
sure.
would be that would be nice. In the meantime, while you work for the regulator. So back to reality. And then finally, you've had a really interesting and, momentous kind of career with, where you are, today in your role. If you could go back in time and give yourself some words of wisdom to young Jim, perhaps just starting out on your career journey, what would you say to yourself to help you thrive and survive and get to where you are now?
Again, great question, and I always kind of thinking through this. I thought about the fact that we're all a work in progress. None of us are our final version. And so a question for me is, am I someone going to be someone that's sitting watching the paint dry, or do I want to continue to do the home improvements and improve upon myself as we're going? And I hope to never stop building and just continue in that process. Um, I think it's
Analogy.
vital. Basically, I think it's vital to take care of our families and ourselves. I certainly am personally have in the course of my career been 150% guilty of not taking a good care of myself because I was so focused on both work and making sure that I was there for my family. And so it's important that we do that so that we are here so that we can continue at the pace we want to of our professional lives and our personal lives, and find that balance. I also really try to each and every day to appreciate the time and the space and the moment that we're in right now.
Yeah.
I feel incredibly fortunate, and I have this little ritual I do each morning when I get to work. I walk out of my office onto a little balcony. I walk to the front of my building, and I take a photograph of the U.S. Capitol. And sometimes, not to tell on myself of when I get to work, but sometimes it says the sun is coming up, and I just get these incredible pictures every once in a while. And it just really reminds me of where I am and what I'm doing. And for me, it's, who am I to have this opportunity? And I just try to appreciate that the moment that I'm in and able to do it. Um, and then kind of, a couple other things. I think it's important that we set goals and have a plan to move forward to where you want to be. I always think about the wonderful quote. Things always seem impossible until it's done, from Nelson
Mhm.
Mandela, and just that's something that always drives me. Um, I recently ran a half marathon. I had
Oh,
never
wow.
run 13 miles at one sitting in until that day,
Congratulations.
and thought it was impossible. But thank you, and but I did it, and so doing
Yeah.
another one in a shorter one, a 10-mile race in a couple weeks. So, and then lastly, listen, learn, and improve, so that we as an individual can grow. And I said that was lastly, but I forgot to add one thing, and that is also to have fun as we're doing our work. If
Very
we're not
important.
enjoying what we're doing, it's really hard to get up the next day and come back to the hard work that we have. But if we can have fun along the way, the hard work becomes much more tolerable.
This is true, although I'm not sure how much fun you can have when you're, like, vomiting ill from just running 25 miles or whatever it is you're doing, right? But kudos to you, right? For doing that. And I guess my last, and it's not, on the list of questions, but, World Safety Day, is coming up in 2 weeks' time, 28th of April. Have you got big plans personally as, OSHA, doing anything exciting or sending out materials? What's happening?
We truly are. I'm really excited about. Thank you for asking that,
No,
because I'm
that's okay.
excited
That's
about
all
what's
right.
going on at OSHA. We at OSHA, in just a little bit over a year ago, for the first time, um, hired an individual into a job position here at OSHA, and her job title is family coordinator. And so she helps us to, as OSHA the regulator, to be a conduit and a liaison to the families of victims of workplace fatalities, the victims themselves in workplace injuries, and to have a voice and an ear, or a set of ears, in those situations. Now, again, with the number that we experience in the U.S. a day, we're probably never at the limited resources we have for this of one person able to
Yeah.
get to everyone. But she does this tremendous job. So part of her job is to plan our events around April 28th, and last year she did a wonderful job, and we had more than a dozen family members of workplace fatality victims who had come in on their own dime to come to Washington D.C. And we had a wonderful, very moving event. There was very much of a important messages being delivered. This year we have grown our event to actually the full week, and with April 28th being on a weekend, we were doing it in the week prior.
Mhm.
So we have events each day. We have some education events. We have kind of a health and safety expo that will be going on at the Department of Labor building here in Washington, D.C. It's going to be both virtual events as well as in-person events. And then we have kind of our workers' memorial event on the Thursday afternoon of that week. And this year, again, last year we had a little bit over a dozen folks that came in. This year we have over 60 people who are coming in, who again are family members of fatality victims from
Oh,
across the
wow.
United States, some very recent and some a number of years ago. But each of them, it's so important for us at OSHA and for the health and safety profession to hear from those stories about what happened, that their loved one didn't come home from a work shift. and the situation around that. Each and every one of them is a horrible, horrible tragedy, but there's also so much we can gain and learn from it. And so are really trying to do that. In the context of all that, I think about, about 15 years ago, of coming to Washington, D.C. for a congressional hearing on Workers' Memorial Day, and coming by in the morning with a group of other health and safety folks, and holding our own little event on the stairs in front of the Department of Labor. And today it has grown into quite the event here. And so, we hope to continue and see that grow each and every year moving forward, and more people being involved to help us take that number 15 and turn it on a downward spiral so that it's less and less each year.
Yeah. No, that sounds fantastic. And like, I mean, obviously it's sad, to have them there, but it also, I'm sure, would provide a conduit and an opportunity for them to share their stories and hopefully get the message out there. And there's always, situations we can learn from bringing in the families of those who've lost loved ones to workplace injuries, or even just an injury as opposed to a fatality as well, right? So it's great you're doing that and appreciating that moment as well. So thank you so much for sharing your evening with me. I've really appreciated all of your valuable insights and getting to know the agency a little bit more as well. So hopefully you have a fantastic night.
Oh, for sure. And same here. No, thank you for reaching out. And I'm so glad we could find some time to chat. And I really truly look forward to I've been following along a little bit. So looking forward
Okay.
to seeing your publication, your book come out before too long.
Thank
And
you.
I'll certainly be on the early list to get a copy of that when it hits the streets.
Well, there you go. That was my chat with the super smart Jim Frederick. Obviously, this was the first time I've had a regulator on the podcast, so it was definitely great to hear a different perspective on things. Although, as you heard in Jim's answer to the first question around effective leadership, whilst he doesn't necessarily march in the safety differently or hop Mardi Gras, he definitely does foster the values of seeing the frontline as experts in their work and ensuring that we create environments where workers feel safe enough to report genuine work health and safety concerns. Then there's his comment around understanding the why. Why are you doing what you're doing in life? He pulls from the number of acute traumatic injuries that occur each day in America as his why, and that to me demonstrates an obvious passion for health and safety. Recently, I sat in on some interviews for safety roles within a business, and when candidates were asked why they wanted to work in health and safety, they could not provide us with their why. Like Jim, for me, health and safety is my jam. I do it because I enjoy the relationships I build that allow me to influence positive change for the better. I do it because I care about human life and I want to get home to what I love. I want others to do the same. If I didn't have a passion or drive for better health and safety outcomes, then I wouldn't be in health and safety. I would be doing something different, maybe something easier. I think we all need to know our why. We need to be clear on what drives us, what we're passionate about, and ensure that we're in a role that taps into that. So if you've got nothing else out of my chat with Jim, I hope that his spin on leadership has inspired you to think a little bit more critically about your why. So in saying that, I'm going to leave this episode here. Until next time, stay safe.